Dear colleagues, welcome to the second Intrans webinar on challenging the split systems. Here is in ISA, International Step-by-Step Association. We are pleased and honored to host this webinar. And I'm Zorica Trikic, Senior Program Manager, and I will try to do my best that you feel welcomed, respected, and that we have smooth and supportive transitions during this webinar. Can we go to the next slide? So you already know, you go, you pick, oh, this is my home country. Hello, Serbia. You pick the language, English, French, or Italian, and this is going to be your channel. And if you have comments, questions, whatever you want to share with us, links to some things that you developed, materials, please use chat and question and answer boxes. And we will do our best to address it during the webinar, but also after the webinar. So we have are we ready to start, officially to start the webinar? As I mentioned, this webinar is organized under Intrans project, co-funded by Erasmus Plus program of the European Union. And for all of you who are not with us for the first time, I will just briefly say that we are talking about the project that aims to ensure that all children and families, especially the most vulnerable ones, benefit from warm and inclusive transitional practices across home, early childhood education and care, and primary school environments. We do it by improving vertical and horizontal continuity and by strengthening both educational transitions and pedagogical continuity. This is the second webinar on challenging the split system, and during the first one we spent a lot of time and energy to provide an answer or answers to the question or questions why it is important to challenge the split system. And today we are going to look for solutions. We are going to share ideas about the alternative pathways to address critical issues raised by maintaining split system. And as we mentioned during the first webinar, it's not by replacing one system with the other, split with unified. It's about creativity and finding alternative pathways to solutions which are going to suit all children and parents. You will again have an opportunity to see the benefits of much needed connection between policy, academia, and practice in addressing complex problems, and why it's important that we have a dialogue, discuss, and nurture each other, and to be able to nurture the others. Today we have with us presenters from Belgium, France, Italy, and the Netherlands. And although most of them are not directly involved in Intrans project, they are contributing to our goal to create a wider forum for policy discussions, starting from the research and advocacy work carried out within the project. We have a very rich agenda from our dear distinguished colleagues and experts. We will learn about shared continuous professional development initiatives for 0 to 3 educators and 3 to 6 teachers in Italy, the experiences of actions and classes passerelles in France, the integrated centers in the Netherlands, and emerging pilot projects on the integration of care and education in Flanders, Belgium. Presentations will be followed by discussions led by policymakers and critical friends. So let us start by inviting Michel Vandenbroeck from University of Ghent. Michel, can you remind us what were the highlights from our previous meeting? The
Yes,
floor is yours.
thank you, Zorica. Well, the previous webinars was followed by over 250 people from many different continents, such as this one. And of course, I especially salute my Belgian compatriots who who prefer to be in this webinar rather than to look at how the Red Devils are doing in football today. But for those who have missed the previous webinar,
You
or
should not mention that. People will leave.
don't mention the war. For those who have missed the previous webinar or wish to review it on the website of ISA, where you registered, you can find the recordings in English, in French and Italian, and also some background papers. From that webinar, well, it is clear that split systems produce a number of structural inequalities. In most countries with split systems where care and education of the youngest children is separated, both in policy and in practice. In most of these countries, there is often a lack of provision for the youngest. Staff is well less trained and also less well paid. In addition, there seems to be a lack of educare. I mean, a lack of an integrated pedagogical approach that takes into account both physical and caring needs, as well as educational needs of children. Now, in the first webinar, we looked at studies from the Netherlands, from France, from Italy, and from Belgium that documented all these problems and these challenges. Several of these studies have illustrated the challenges that transitions from one educational system to the other can represent. We're talking about transitions from childcare to preschool, but also from the home to preschool, and how these present or can present serious challenges and can also exacerbate the educational gap between children from higher and lower economic strata. That is what the researchers showed in the previous webinar. And their studies revealed, of course, important differences in what the splits in systems really mean for children in different countries. But there's also a few things in common. What was common in many of the studies presented was the concern about the many different caretakers, the many different educators or teachers across the first years of life, and how these different professionals, how that jeopardizes the continuity of care, as these different professionals rarely meet to discuss their approach. As a result, there are quite different visions on what early childhood education is about, on what school readiness may mean, diverging visions of children, and diverging visions on the professionals' identities. The lack in professional continuity may be harmful for serving children's needs, and it may particularly harm those children who are less familiar with the implicit rules and for whom the lack of pedagogical continuity may hinder their educational trajectories. Today, we will have a closer look at innovative and pioneering practice that precisely deal with this professional split and that looks at forms of collaboration, forms of smoother transitions, and indeed sometimes also of real integration. We look at these pioneering practices that are documented, that are studied, that are researched, and therefore that can be a source of inspiration to others, even when they may be very specific to their localized contexts. Back to you, Zorica.
I have to unmute myself. Thank you, Michel. It was very inspiring. And you mentioned in many different ways how the split system is hurting or might hurt the most disadvantaged children, but it is also hurting the workforce by dividing them, by confronting them, and by cutting connections and possibilities for them to learn from each other and grow together. And I'm very happy that today's webinar we are starting with a very inspiring experience from Italy about shared continuing professional development initiatives for 0 to 3 educators and 3 to 6 teachers. And I'm really pleased to welcome our colleagues Tullia Musatti and Mariacristina Picchio from the Institute of Cognitive Sciences and Technologies, National Research Council from Italy. Benvenuto Tullia and Mariacristina, the floor is yours.
Grazie Zoriza e buon pomeriggio a tutti.
Thank you, Zoriza. Good afternoon, everybody. Well, the aim of our presentation today is to discuss the strategic function that continuous professional development may play in the construction of an integrated 0-6 education system, including both the 0-3 and 3-6 segments, highlighting which elements can contribute to its qualification. As Arianna Lazzari and Lucia Balduzzi already illustrated in the previous webinar, the early childhood education and care system in Italy has undergone major changes over recent years. Here we will just summarize the major elements of this. Next slide. In Italy, early childhood education provision is still divided into 2 sectors depending on the age of their children. Early childhood education services for children under the age of 3, including childcare provisions and supplementary services such as playgrounds and centers for children and families, and the sezioni primavera, in which educators work, and preschools for children aged 3 through 6, where teachers work. However, in 2015, a national law provided to bring the 2 sectors together to merge them in an integrated system of education and training from birth to 6 years under the responsibility of the Ministry of Education, with the aim of responding, of meeting the children's right to education since the very birth. Subsequent decree law, Decree 65 from 2017, also outline a complex governance of the integrated system based on a close cooperation between state, regions, and local authorities. 2 recent documents issued by the Ministry of Education, namely the Linee pedagogiche, pedagogical guidelines for the integrated 0-6 system and the national guidelines for childhood education services, outlined a cultural and pedagogical framework for developing a coherent approach to care and education from 0 to 6, both horizontally between services provided by different providers and vertically to guarantee the continuity of children's experience in the 0 to 3 services and then in the preschool. 2 actions are crucial to overcome the split system. The first one is the creation of territorial, local pedagogical coordination networks. And the second is the organization of shared continuous professional development initiatives between the staff of the 2 different segments. The latest national plan offering a financial support to the integrated system states that not less than 5% of the funds should be allocated for the implementation of these actions. And last year, the Ministry of Education in Italy urged its regional departments to organize, together with the municipalities, joint continuing education initiatives for educators and teachers. Now, achieving a quality joint professional development training requires addressing two important issues. Next slide, please. The first is a cultural one, because even today, a different approach to care and education characterizes the two segments of the system. In the 0 to 3 segment, indeed, created to provide assistance to working mothers, the educational perspective has been acquired over the years, starting from the practices developed over time that have recognized the sense of agency of children from the earliest months of life, and has led to the development of a holistic approach that recognizes the educational value of every act of care. Many Italian preschools in Italy also recognize the value of children's doing and their leading role in the learning processes, drawing inspiration, for instance, from the thinking of Montessori, of Malaguzzi, of Ciari. However, still a pedagogical approach geared to preparing for primary school is widespread. These cultural differences are further underlined by the different initial training paths for educators and teachers. For 0 to 3 educators, a 3-year degree in Scienza dell'Educazione, Education Science, is required with a specific program on early childhood. This is a very different curriculum from that provided for preschool and primary school teachers. In the 5-year degree in Scienza della Formazione Primaria, primary education, which is unbalanced on disciplinary teaching or subject matters. Next slide, please. The second issue concerns the different continuous professional development opportunities provided by the employment contracts of educators and teachers working in educational services or schools under different management. In the educational services and preschools managed by the municipalities, the employment contract of both 0 to 3 educators and teachers guarantees a significant number of hours, from 80 to 200 per year, to be used to participate in collegial meetings, liaise with parents, carry out reporting activities, and also participate in continuous professional development initiatives. This working time, not being in contact with the children, was of great importance in the development of an original educational culture, since it was able to support the collegial work of the educational team. And within the framework of ongoing training initiatives, it also promoted not only the skills of single educators or teachers, but also those of the entire team. In state-run preschools, teachers have 40 hours. I'm sorry, I wrote 80, but it is 40 hours per year to devote to planning meetings with parents and ongoing training activities. Each school draws up a professional development plan, but teachers can choose individually from a range of ministry accredited training courses and have an annual card to cover the costs of their chosen courses or to purchase books. Let's say that a rough estimation of the time spent annually on continuous professional development is between 12 and 15 hours. In the private sectors, the employment contracts of educators and teachers vary widely, as do the opportunities to access continuing professional development. Some contracts guarantee a minimum of 12 paid hours of in-service training per year, but others provide none. In order to respond to these challenges, some local administrations have been organizing ongoing professional development initiatives shared between municipal 0 to 3 services and municipal preschools, or between municipal and private 0 to 3 services on the basis of specific agreements between the local administration and the private provisions for some years now. Most of these initiatives were characterized by two common elements. the fact that professionals were called upon to analyze and discuss the educational practices implemented in their daily work with children and their families, and that external experts had the role of guiding and accompanying the professionals' reflection rather than transmitting theoretical or practical knowledge. Next slide, please. Within this framework, two action research projects carried out over the last 10 years by our research group can be included. The group also includes Isabella Di Giandomenico and Susanna Meyer, and were conducted in cooperation with the Pistoia municipality, which has always paid a particular attention to the qualification of educators and teachers. The first project brought together educators from municipal and private 0 to 3 services and teachers from municipal and state preschools during 5 school years. The second project involved educators from the 0 to 3 municipal and private services of all the 7 municipalities of Pistoia district, the Pistoia area, during 2 school years. In the slide, you can see the number and type of services involved in the 2 projects. Next slide, please. Both projects had as an objective that of analyzing children's experience in the daily life of the childcare provision or school and its evolution over time, taking into account its different aspects, so children's sociability, their play and exploration paths, how the children use the spaces and experience times and rhythms of the day, in order to identify educational practices to improve the quality of this experience. The suggestion we gave the educators and teachers to proceed was to found their analysis on observing the children's experience over the course of the month and documenting what they observed by means of written descriptions supplemented by photos and videos. Then each group of educators and teachers presented their analysis on their documentation and reporting, which was made also at the level of the educational collegium or board, and discussed it with educators and teachers from other services of school, together with pedagogical coordinators and researchers during periodic meetings. So the context was that of an extended collegiality. Next slide, please. The analysis of the discussions that took place during these meetings allowed us to identify some qualifying elements for achieving a shared approach to education and care by the professionals of 0 to 3 and 3 to 6 municipal, state, and private provisions, also located in different areas. First of all, the use by educators and teachers of the same reporting procedures, which made it possible to anchor the discussion to the analysis of the children's experience by highlighting the relationship with the specificity of each context and the practices implemented. It was therefore not just a matter of bringing into dialogue the representation and expectations of educators and teachers with respect to their educational role and with respect to an abstract, and a general image of the child. It was the sharing of the analysis of children's experiences in the various educational services and schools that offered the opportunity to see with new eyes the potential and social and cognitive skills in the period from 0 to 6, and also to grasp the elements of continuity. One example for all, where the reflection developed on the needs and skills of children in the evolutionary transition from 2.5 to 3.5 years, which is a transition age between the childcare provision and preschool. Children who are considered elder by educators and young by teachers. Moreover, the multi-year duration of the 2 projects made it possible to give continuity to the reflections of educators and teachers, allowing their new skills and knowledge to take root, and also stimulating the need for further investigation. We also would like to highlight that the involvement of ECEC professionals working in different educational contexts led to the strengthening of the network of services in the same area. And this was an important step towards the qualification of the entire local 0 to 6 education system. The sharing of reflection and comments among colleagues in different gathering moments was an important opportunity for them because it enhanced the professional competencies of the operators, their professional skills, improved their daily practices, and also strengthened their sense of belonging to the same system. Next slide, please. Although the experience carried out in the municipality of Pistoia and its district has specific characteristics, we believe that the approach of this project, the structure of this project, can be usefully duplicated in other territorial contexts, adjusting it, however, according to their culture and resources. This experience has further demonstrated, as already experimented in other initiatives implemented in our country, that in order to build a shared perspective on the care and education of children from 0 to 6 years of age, it is necessary to create opportunities for dialogue between professionals working in public and private provisions. It is likewise necessary to definitely abandon transmissive models of training in favor of initiatives that make educators and teachers the agents of their own professional growth and may accompany them to develop over time a shared reflective attitude around their own practices and the values underpinning them. Well, the imperative of cultivating this attitude was made all the more evident by the challenges posed by pandemics, where teachers and educators deeply felt the need to confront themselves with the experiences of colleagues from other realities in order to share difficulties and uncertainties, but also to rethink the aims and procedures of even the most established or well-established educational practices. To conclude, it is quite clear that effective continuous professional development initiatives require certain essential organizational conditions. The first one is employment contracts that guarantee an adequate number of paid hours for training carried out at team level, and the offer of non-occasional, non-episodic training courses that provide enough space and time to promote systematic comparison between professionals and may allow their reflection and acquired knowledge to take root. To conclude, it is equally clear that the planning and implementation of good quality continuous professional development initiatives should be a priority issue today on the agenda of the interinstitutional tables between the state, regions, and municipalities provided for by law. Thank you for your attention.
Oh, thank you so much. It was really inspiring. Thank you, Mariacristina, and thank you, Tullia, and thank you, Italy, for being a cradle for so many beautiful ideas that we are all using. And what was really, really impressive is this kind of, it's a process of empowering people and the workforce and bringing them together to see the holistic child, build shared understanding. And what I think it's very important to stress, like that people can be equal but asymmetric in terms that we can all learn from each other. So thank you. We learned a lot from you. So let's move to France. Sorry. I would like to invite our colleagues, Pascal Garnier and Sylvie Reina from Sorbonne Paris Nord University. Paris.
Est-ce qu'on peut partager notre présentation, s'il vous plaît?
Welcome, everyone. Can we please share our presentation?
Merci bien.
Good afternoon. Today we are going to explore the so-called bridging systems, which are aimed at increasing coherence, continuity, and equity in the French ECEC split system from 0 to 6 years. Next slide.
Diapo suivante. Alors, le système français, donc divisé avec d'un côté le système scolaire.
So we have the nursery schools that are part of the primary schools, and children that can also be welcomed in also peri-school time in red, and from for 0-3 children, we have a collective welcoming system for very small children. In this case, the 2-year-olds can attend the 3 systems. These bridging classes consist of linking the different worlds of these children and the different modalities. We have 3 types of systems: the so-called bridging classes in nursery schools, the bridging actions between families, daycare, kindergarten, and leisure centers, and thirdly, training, educational bridging systems. These systems were born out of the first experiences of links between families, nurseries, and kindergartens in the years after 1968.
Next. Alors, tout d'abord, voyons la première catégorie, les classes
First of all, let's see the first category, the bridging classes in nursery schools. These classes, which have existed since 1991, are addressed to 2-year-olds who have not had any out-of-home care experience and who live in so-called disadvantaged neighborhoods. They differ from ordinary classes for 2, 3, 4, or 5-year-olds in nursery schools in that they are only made up of 20 children. Then they have 3 adults in them, 1 teacher, 1 agent, and also 1 educator. And an increased space giving to families. For example, in Roubaix, they have created 1, then 2, then 3, and finally 12 bridging classes. These are time spaces to befriend the school, to familiarize with it. In 2002, an inspection report by the 2 ministries did not deny the interest of the bridging classes, but did not support the dissemination of the system, which is fragile and unevenly spread across the country. However, in 2005, the evaluation of the bridging classes in Roubaix was positive, including in terms of educational achievement in primary school. Our comparative study of the experience of 2-year-olds in different groups of children confirms the interest of these transition classes, where the practices of professionals, of educators, teachers, and ATSEM.
Next slide, please. Alors maintenant, passons aux actions passerelles.
Now let's see what are the bridging actions. These are, first of all, actions between families and kindergartens aimed at children aged 2 to 3, not benefiting from any form of daycare and living in disadvantaged neighborhoods. These are proposed moments of collective life in municipal places, former social centers, for example, for a certain period of time before the start of the school year, accompanied by early childhood staff. A teacher comes to these places to meet the children and their families, then introduces them to the school, visit to the premises, sharing of activities with children there, etc. And as in the so-called On the Road to School bridging action undertaken in Nantes in the 1990s or in other cities, this action can take place in a nursery school in the hall, for example, as in Saint-Priest, a working class suburb of Lyon. Next slide.
Next slide, please.
Next slide, please.
Le deuxième type de classe
Secondly, there are other types of bridging actions, in this case between nurseries and preschools. These are the so-called varied pathways that bring together 2-year-olds from the nursery and 3-year-olds and older from preschool, and involve different learning modalities, which may change from one year to the next. For example, in Paris, in the 13th district, several years of collaboration between the directors of a daycare and a school led them last year to organize the participation of small groups of 2-year-olds from the daycare in the school's sustainable development projects every Tuesday morning throughout the year. And this is done with the parents. So we have gardening with the director of the school, and it is a whole process of getting to know each other's places, people, and practices. On another day of the week, this same daycare was working simultaneously with another school in the neighborhood, which made a reading and playroom available to it. The many informal meetings with all the people working in the school, the janitor, director, staff, teachers, which led to a sense of accomplishment, as this nursery school director wrote. And so these children started here when they were very little. The same results can be observed when these bridging actions are carried out with school leisure centers. For example, the daycare teams work with after-school activity leaders during after-school hours in the evening and on Wednesday afternoons. These actions often starts with shared lunches before the summer between children from the daycare and the school. And some 3-year-olds from the daycare can then spend the summer at the leisure center instead of staying at the daycare, for example. The daycare staff are a resource for the after-school workers who are in demand for knowledge and skills with the younger children in the school. We have several examples of these. For example, one in Paris, where we have the sharing of regular art sessions between children from a daycare and a leisure center, during which the daycare children learn about school and its extracurricular activities, and the adults learn from each other. So the start of the school year is made easier, both for the animators, for the agents, for teachers, adults, and children all together. Another example in the 5th arrondissement, where another pair collaborates in regular alternating activities at the nursery school or at the school. And we have daycare staff that also participate in the first week of school for the children during extra curricular or school time. So they work together with the children, but also after the school, during the lunch or in the afternoon after school. So the children coming from this experience are very familiar with the school, and they also help welcome the other children in their class for whom it's a shock to be there. These experiences can remain individual, but they can also give rise to local dynamics, which are facilitated if early childhood from 0 to 3 years is present in the territorial educational projects of the municipalities, for example, in Paris. Also, if those responsible for coordinating daycare centers, schools, and leisure centers stimulate and support the bridging processes. And this support by, first of all, intercategory meetings to get to know each other, to present the progress of existing bridging actions, but also by participating in joint events, for example, a festival in Paris or preparing together throughout the year, or also by supporting joint projects, for example, producing a joint booklet of nursery rhymes, and also by organizing joint training courses and their follow-up. For example, training with artists or with the staff of the after-school centers of the schools or of the daycare, which make it possible to find out new languages, which is a different language that can put them together, but also other types of innovative training processes. For example, right now I'm in Pistoia, and throughout the week I'm going to accompany a group of professionals from Paris, directors of nursery schools, of after-school services, and of kindergartens, who are here to get to know these bridging classes and to increase their knowledge. And thirdly, we have the support to be given to the analysis and documentation of the bridging actions carried out. Next slide, please. The last type of bridging system is actually supported by the Ministry of Culture and experimented in one region, the Grand Est. These are bridging residencies, that is, actions carried out by artists with daycares and kindergartens located in disadvantaged neighborhoods. These are called Cité Éducative, and we are waiting for the documentation.
Next slide, please.
Next slide. Finally, before handing the floor to my colleague, I'm going to talk about also the different types of bridging education. We have continuing education and also initial training. The bridging training processes are quite rare here. And as for continuing education, these are intercategory trainings to bring together the various professional cultures. For example, from the artistic point of view. And for the moment, nothing has been envisaged for the training of 0 to 3 year teachers. And also there are some possibilities of bridging processes between small children and the after-school activities, especially for the certificate that makes it possible to work not only during the school time, but also during the after-school time. This is everything I wanted to say, and I can hand the floor to my colleague. Next slide, please. As a conclusion, I would like to emphasize the challenges of transitional arrangements between national and local levels. On the national side, we have had different national policies of territorialization of education, especially in disadvantaged areas since the 1980s, with the establishment of priority education policies favoring schooling for the under 3-year-olds. Unfortunately, these are only local initiatives with variable geometry because they depend on the size, on the organization, and also on the wealth of the towns and inhabitants. Second weakness of these local initiatives is that they are based on the voluntary actions of individuals. So there is also always a problem of sustainability and institutionalization of actions and systems. While these type of systems shouldn't be disseminated by the national policies that implemented them. Next slide. These weaknesses of these transition processes lead us to focus on the transition mechanisms and to go towards integrated systems. This has to do, this is the focus of a report from 2018 from Daniel Agacinski and Catherine Colombe, who had already envisaged in their analysis a new era for kindergartens. For example, today we need to think about how the project for a public service for early childhood from 2022, also with a national charter for the care of young children, which is contained in a decree from 2021 for children from 0 to 3 years of age. Any possible articulation between these small childhood sector and also a new plan for the kindergartens. So focused on this transition issue. So we have to do with two ministries that work independently. So we have the problem of governance at the level of ministerial policies and also in terms of a long-term project in order to implement progressively the integration between these two sectors. In conclusion, we would like to talk about decontextualized research systems. This cannot be a revolution, but as it is shown by Italy, this is something very progressive that can start from a local initiative, but that can become something at the national level. This can be documented to accompany this transformation for practitioners and also for educators. And the webinar today, this international webinar, shows the importance of the consideration of these foreign experiences in Italy, especially the one that has just been presented by Italy. Thanks for your attention. Next slide. This is just some bibliography. Next slide. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Pascal and Sylvie. And we will share your PowerPoint on Intrans webpage, so people will be able to see the literature. And I apologize for the way how I introduced you. I just underestimated my allergy to air conditioning, so I started to have problems. But thank you very much. And it was very interesting to see how you covered everything, including involving parents and children and policymakers. And as we know, sometimes the best things are blossoming when you take this bottom-up approach. So thank you so much. Merci beaucoup. And now, when we heard two very interesting practices, I would like to bring in a critical and reflective friend and hear what are his comments and questions. Michel Vandenbroeck, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Zorita. I think it was quite interesting to have these two observations from Italy and France next to each other, as they are concerned with the similar issue of overcoming the challenge of a split system, but take a quite different approach. And from the example of Italy, it was clear that what the importance is of having a political support and a political will to go forward in this direction. And in France, it was more like an initiative of practitioners despite the political division, rather than thanks to a political concern or policy concern would be better expression.
Sorry, Michel, are you unmuted? It seems that some people cannot hear you.
I am unmuted and on the original channel. So should I go to the English channel? So
Yeah, please go to English.
Better then. Okay. Okay. So I was saying that it is interesting to have the difference between the French and the Italian approach next to each other, or experience next to each other, with in Italy a strong policy commitment, and in France it's more, despite the lack of policy commitment, that things are evolving through the commitment of practitioners and local leaders, which makes them fragile, as Pascal rightly said. Considering some difference between both systems, I would have a short question, and we don't have much time to elaborate, but to both of them. My question to Italian is, what I think was interesting in the French is how they think of passerelle, of transitions, not only between childcare and preschool, but also between preschool and the school-age childcare, the centre de loisirs, the periscola. And so my question to the Italian colleagues was, is that also part of your reflection of how these more extended school days are part of the 0-6 ambition?
Franchement, mi dispiace, ma non ho capito la domanda, forse nella traduzione.
The question wasn't very clear.
Okay, so what you presented in the 0-6 project is this, to work on the integration of a thinking of between the 0-3 and the 3-6. But do you also consider within this 3-6 age the relation between preschool and the free time, the centre de loisirs? Is that part of the project?
Ecco, purtroppo in maniera meno accentuata che nel...
Well, unfortunately, we do this less compared to France. There are a number of services which are open to all children, 0-3, 3-6 altogether, such as library spaces to which children have access in the afternoon with their parents. There are also centers for children and parents, but there are some outdoor activities during school holidays, but there is no after-school activities, especially aimed at a more overarching approach. And I think that we should really work on this aspect. We are carrying out some territorial agreements right now. They go in this direction, but this is just an early stage.
Okay.
Would you like to add something, Mariacristina?
No, credo che hai detto tutto quello che c'era, che possiamo dire.
No, I don't need to add anything. I think that you said it all. I would like to add something in this new post for childhood. I think that this new post for childhood should go in that direction. They shouldn't just be an aggregation of 0 to 3 years children services and also different classes of preschools, but which should also cover the territory and become part of educational enlarged agreements that also include older children.
Okay.
Hopefully.
Michel, we have a comment from Mulumbu. I'm not sure I can read the name, from Democratic Republic of Congo, and I think it's very interesting. I think this is what we were discussing, that maybe we are now sharing European examples, and maybe it's time to go globally and to learn from each other. So,
Okay.
unfortunately, Milumbu, we do not know a lot about development in Africa, but we are eager to learn. Sorry, Michel.
But I wanted to point it out as a second point, which is, I think it was very important and interesting how our Italian colleagues stressed the importance of continuous professional development in such an important transition period, and how they in that continuous professional development develop a common culture and a common language to speak about their work. And so I would just, can you briefly, Pascal or Sylvie, can you briefly comment on that? Because my impression was that in your situations of emerging practices bottom up, that this is something that you really miss, or how can this be further supported?
Sylvie, ton micro.
Sylvie, your microphone, please.
Alors, pour ce qui me concerne, je ne connais pas, nous n'avons pas
So, as far as I'm concerned, I don't have any sufficient initiative about this initiative in France. I think we should look for that. So I don't know how many municipalities are involved, territorial level or municipal level, in this education project where 0 to 3 children are involved. So I don't know. I think it's something we can do in the future. As for the project in Paris, we are at the third territorial education project. So the last one, the latest one, was signed for younger children. And so in this framework, I'm here for the first group, that is the second arrondissement, a mix of different categories. It covers the entire year, and in February there will be a new group, and then a third one, and a fourth one. And so it is a process covering all the arrondissement in Paris. There will be an inspector from the National Education Center, a director of childcare provision. So we will be testing different aspects, and it will be, research that will be done at the level of Paris. We hope we can, share reports of that, and definitely we need also scientific research about that. It is definitely needed as for this topic, and also in other municipalities. I'm sure there are things which are ongoing, and we have to have evidence about that, because in this way we can, nourish and feed the national policies, as it happens in Italy.
Okay, I'm afraid that's all we have time for. I would just ask Mr. or Mrs. Milumbu, who has put interesting things in the chat. If you have any reports about this UNICEF and World Bank financed project, could you please put the link in the chat, so then we can all have access to that probably very interesting document. Thank you, and back to you, Zorita.
Yes, and I hope that the next webinar we will have cross-continental sharing of good practices. So now I'm going to take you to the Netherlands, where my organization, International Step-by-Step Association, is based. And I would like to welcome Ruben Fukin from University of Amsterdam and Amsterdam University of Applied Science, and his colleague Pauline Slot from University of Utrecht. Unfortunately, Pauline is just giving lecture at her university, so she's not with us. But Ruben is going to tell us a lot about findings from the integrated centers in the Netherlands. Welcome, Ruben, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Zorika, and also thank you, Vanessa, for your technical support today. Well, we've heard already some stories from Italy and France about alternative pathways, and in today's presentations, I will talk about the integrated toddler preschool group. And this is a Dutch phenomenon. It's quite new, it's even quite rare. And I can give some first empirical results of an ongoing study that I'm currently conducting with Pauline Slot and myself. So next slide, please. Here you see a map of Europe. It's from the well-known Eurydice report that Michel Vandenbroeck already introduced in the first webinar. As you can see, the Netherlands is this small country, it's red, and we have a split system. And maybe the Netherlands are even the European champion in split systems. I do not know whether we should be proud of this, but I feel there's a huge gap between childcare, early childhood education and care, and elementary school. Next slide, please. Still, we see a movement, it's a bottom-up movement of integration, and we see integrated centers for children between 0 and 12 years old. And in these integrated centers, you see more and more cooperation. And we want to provide integrated services for children, for families. And this means that the staff at these integrated centers, they need to have a shared vision and they need to share the same goals. And this is to realize pedagogical continuity in practice for young children, for families, and for staff. Well, these integrated centers, they are relatively new. Their numbers are increasing. And we see that teams with different professionals, with different backgrounds, they have started to collaborate. And they have a background in education and care. They have a background in elementary school. And very often they have a different background related to youth care. Next slide, please. Here you see one of these integrated toddler preschool groups, and it's part of an integrated school center. Maybe when you look at this picture, you may see that it looks like an elementary school, actually. It looks like kindergarten. And Dutch childcare looks a little bit different. So the physical environment of this group seems to be influenced by elementary school. Perhaps this group, well, it's empty now, but this group may be sort of linking pin, a bridge, so to speak, as a sort of solution to cross the huge gap that we have between childcare and elementary school. In this group, professionals from childcare and elementary school work together from, let's say, 8:30 till the end of the afternoon. They plan together, they work together, they evaluate together, and they are here throughout the day to teach the children, to support the children, and to work with the families. Next slide, please. Here you see some of these children. The faces are blurred for privacy reasons. And here you see toddlers and preschoolers sitting next to each other. And here they have circle time and they share fruit. Well, that's a typical tradition in the Netherlands. Next slide, please. The study that we are currently conducting is relatively small. Actually, we have visited 9 locations. And one of the reasons why our study is so small is because these special groups, actually they are illegal. Strictly speaking, it is not allowed to mix toddlers and preschoolers because we have different governance, we have different inspection, we have different rules for group size, we have different rules for the caregiver-child ratio. So inspectors, they face a difficult time in judging the quality of these groups. And what we see at local, at some locations, we see these groups have started and they are allowed. So the inspector says, well, actually, this does not meet the Dutch regulations, but then there is no legal enforcement. So we really had to search the entire country to find some of these groups. It was very hard to find them, but here they are, 9 groups. They come from different parts of the Netherlands, and we even used a random selection procedure to conduct this small-scale study. And we think it's the first empirical study of this very special group in the Netherlands. Next slide, please. We looked at the quality, we looked at the well-being and the involvement of children. It's an ongoing study, and I can present here some of the very first results, including the interviews. Here you see a figure where we show the quality of the emotional support as measured with the class measure. This is a widely used measure, originally from the US, but it's also used in European countries, other countries as well, including the Netherlands. As you can see, the quality provided by the caregivers and provided by the teachers is adequate to good. In some locations, it was even good. There was no inadequate quality in our small sample. Next slide, please. Here you see instructional support. And again, the level of instructional support is adequate in many locations, and it was even good in a larger number of locations, and there was no inadequate quality. So, to summarize, both the emotional support and instructional support seem adequate in these integrated toddler preschool groups. Next slide, please. We have also recreated these, we call it tips and tops. So some advice, some things that went really well, some things that are maybe suboptimal. And on the left, you see some evaluations for the groups that we visited that were really good. So for the toddlers, there was very often a positive climate. And for the preschoolers, productivity in the activities was, generally speaking, good. The staff was generally sensitive. And here you see different things, different aspects of pedagogical quality that were good or even very good. On the right, you see some aspects of pedagogical quality that we may improve upon. So the quality of feedback may require some attention. Stimulating language for toddlers is difficult and needs more emphasis. There is, as you can see in this slide, there were both pros and cons, there were both tips and tops related to the pedagogical quality for both toddlers and preschoolers, because we analyze this separately. Next slide, please. We had interviews with both the caregiver from early child education and care and the teacher of the elementary school at the end of our sessions. And here you have some quotes from the interviews. The staff, they emphasized that these special groups, they result into a smoother transition for toddlers. And then you have a better start at school. And this is a huge advantage. It gives you some time to identify problems, perhaps learning delays, perhaps some problems with some behavioral problems. You can identify them, you can discuss them, and maybe you can start to intervene. The group, by the way, is usually small, and you have both a caregiver and a teacher. So actually, it's an extensive group, but this allows you to identify weaknesses and to work on them for almost a full school year. Next slide, please. It's not just about gains for children. It's also about professional development and about learning as a professional. And maybe these toddler preschooler groups are the linking pin because they create more coherence. So in the integrated center, now we have a group where professionals work on a daily basis with children, and they have to invent and they have to shape educare on a daily basis. One of the things that the professionals have noted is that there is now much more planning. There's an idea how to move from A to B to C, etc., throughout the school year. Directors are really enthusiastic and they want to increase the numbers of these special groups. And the professionals, they emphasize that they learn from each other. You exploit each other's qualities. So it's a two-way street. There's also a disadvantage. This special group is not really a single unit. Sometimes they work together, sometimes they work separately. Depending on the location, we see more coherent programs and programs that are that operate on a much more smaller basis. And they have a restricted program. Next slide, please. One of the barriers, as you may have expected, is, of course, the maintenance of this group. When inspectors say this group is inadequate, then you are dependent on the local authorities, and maybe they will close the group. And then this is the end of the preschooler group. Many preschool groups, toddler preschool groups that we wanted to visit, they were closed already. So this is one of the main issues. The directors and the professionals, they emphasized that the legal frameworks in the Netherlands, they must be more flexible to allow experimentation, to explore alternative pathways. They also said, actually, it's quite an expensive group because of staffing. As I said, the group of children is relatively small, and you have 2 professionals working on this group. And the professionals emphasize we need more time for consultation, and then we can even learn more from each other. Next slide, please. So, in a nutshell, I've introduced these toddler preschool groups to you from the Netherlands, and the Netherlands has a split system, and these special toddler preschool groups, they are rare and they do not fit in the Dutch system, and this is why they are so interesting from a theoretical perspective, but also from a policy perspective. We see different versions. The light version is that toddlers and preschoolers meet regularly, but only during a couple hours in a week. We also see for special groups where there is an integrated and stable group. And these toddlers and preschoolers, they meet from Monday till Friday, each morning. And there is a planning throughout the year. So toddler preschool group is not a fixed format. It's rather flexible in practice. Pauline Slot and I are currently finishing our empirical study. We would like to publish it both in Dutch and in English. So maybe we can come back to you some other time, some other place. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for sharing, and we really want to see more. But what is striking for me is that we are still focused on the system and not what is the benefit of children and families. So it's really amazing, and I think that you could find a lot of like data to support idea of this integrated programs in countries like in ex-Yugoslavia or in Africa or in other places where you have in one room children of different ages and teachers have to be magicians to manage to do the work. So as I said, we have a lot to learn from the other parts of the world. Greetings to Pauline. Sorry that she's not with us, and thank you for sharing this. And you owe us this research when you are done.
It's a
And
promise.
now, yeah, and now we just go to Belgium, and we wish Belgium all the best today. And I would like to introduce Kathy Jacobs from governmental agency Opgein. Then Lopke van Lombergen from Ghent University, and Marie Hausen and Florence Pirard from University of Leeds. And they will tell us something about emerging pilot projects on the integration of care and education in Flanders. And don't laugh at me, you never try to speak Dutch.
Thank you, Tullia. It's indeed opgroeien, but it's
You see,
you can
I was
translate it,
exercising and I failed. So
you can translate it as upbringing, something like that. Good afternoon, all of you. We are very glad that we can introduce also some alternative pathways of Belgium. I will explain the project Doorgaande Lijn as an experimental project in Flanders. It explores how we can grow towards a more integrated working in ECEC. And doorgaande lijn, Dutch word, can be understood as a line that continues, and so it emphasizes the necessity to put the well-being of children first, for whom developing is an ongoing and continuous process. Next slide. And next slide. And perhaps also next slide. Thank you. The collaboration between the policy areas of welfare and education has been ongoing since 2007. And in addition to the efforts that are made to allow preschoolers to participate in a timely and regular manner, in recent years, the focus has also shifted to support a warm transition between home, the neighborhood, childcare, and preschool education. The working group with policymakers of welfare, education, and integration, together with researchers and users, developed an action plan and monitors the action. The example you see here is its do-it-yourself package as a result of the collaboration. Previous slide, perhaps. It offers a manual for local networks of various partners related to education and welfare to organize realistic actions to warm transitions. But during the COVID crisis, it became clear that how the different policy and regulatory approaches impact children and families. So we made use of the opportunities in order to go one step further. And that means that the Social Recovery Committee approved to set up pilots to experiment on more integrated childcare, preschool and out-of-school care facilities. Now we can to the next. I will briefly explain the objective, the framework and the structure of the project. Also the next. The objective speaks for itself in order to look for solutions on the key issues of the split system. First, we like to develop models of practice that shapes integrated working with childcare for babies and toddlers, preschool education, and out-of-school care in order to develop an integrated path for children of age 0 till 6. That means that, taking into account the different perspectives of children, parents, professionals, and organizations, the pilots have to work on different continuities. At first, the pedagogical continuity, whereby education and care is interwoven. Also, continuity during the day and over the year, and the continuity at one location or at different but nearby locations. A professional continuity, and this all in close connection with home and the neighborhood of the children. And second, in order to work on a structural continuity also, it is of interest to identify the obstacles in regulatory frameworks and to have a better understanding of the necessary conditions that allows and facilitates this integrated working. Next. This project and the use of the available resources have been approved in a Flemish government decree. By means of a call for projects, we selected 12 partnerships that are pioneers to experiment for 3 years. Each partnership receives 55,000 euros grants annually, and they have to account, they can choose how to spend it on either operational or staff resources, but it must be accounted for in an annual report. And we work with 2 phases in this project period. Based on the inventory of obstacles in the first phase, we will create a temporary regulatory leeway for the second phase. In this way, the pioneers can explore even more how to realize the continuities, and out of that evaluation, we will gain a better insight into those necessary conditions. Next, please. To achieve the objectives, we developed the following project structure. We have the 12 pioneers who implement their own project proposal locally, but they also come together in a learning network. This is supported by a learning partner, a cooperation of VBEK and SEGO, both with a lot of knowledge and expertise on transitions in split systems. The emphasis is on exchanging, inspiring, and learning from each other. We have a core group, Kerngroup, with policy officers from welfare and education, and they coordinate the project. And we have also a steering group consisting of various stakeholders such as umbrella organizations, trade unions, and inspection, always in delegation of either welfare or education, together with a learning partner and user organizations. They have an important role in the monitoring of the project and in drafting advice and recommendations throughout those 2 phases. Next, please. So now the outlines are clear. I would like to zoom in on concrete practice of the 12 pioneers and the current state of affairs. Next, please. First of all, we can say that the profile of the partnership differs in terms of location, organizational forms, and pedagogical visions. But it was also a conscious choice to include this diversity so that developed models of practice could be applicable later onto a diversity of partnerships. We see also different starting positions with regard to achieving the objective of integrated working. Some pioneers started with an intentional collaboration, others can fall back and build on a strong existing collaboration. So that's a challenge for the learning network. Every pioneer agrees that it's necessary to exchange on pedagogical frameworks and to look together for more cooperation in the daily practice. Several projects put forward Educare as the basic idea, and they focus on a shared practice of development, stimulation, and monitoring. And finally, all pioneers take the task of accessibility seriously. Some of the pioneers will share a well-thought-out parent policy, others focus on the embedding in their neighborhood and work with bridge or liaison figures. And finally, concerning the obstacles, the inventory is yet made, clustered in different topics, such as infrastructure, staff status, and so on. The steering group has written an advice on whether or not to let go of current regulations temporarily, and this will now be discussed with the cabinets of the ministries concerned. That's where we are at this moment. So if you have any questions or want to stay informed, you will find the contact details in the next slide. Thank you.
Thank you. Lotke and the others will continue, yes? please.
Yes, I will take the floor. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lopke. I'm a PhD researcher at Ghent University. And today I will be talking about my own PhD research with the topic of group compositions in early childhood education and care as a way of challenging the split system. Next slide, please. As you might know, in early childhood education and care, there are different ways of grouping children, of assigning children to groups, ranging from a more traditional horizontal age group to vertical cross-age groups, but there are also growing groups, groups based on children's needs. And when we take these vertical cross-age groups into account, we see that despite the benefits such as continuity in places, in faces, children learning from each other, but also children experiencing fewer transitions. We do see that there is research that shows that quality in these vertical groups, and especially quality in vertical groups for infants, is lower than quality in horizontal baby groups. When the age difference is quite large, the likelihood of lower quality interaction is also higher. And moreover, groups with more infants might also be related to lower quality and less meaningful interactions. And that might be a very big problem because meaningful interactions are part of process quality and play an important role in children's development, children's learning, and children's well-being. Next slide, please. Yes. As indicated, there is a change in grouping children, and therefore it seems crucial to investigate what these alternative ways of grouping look like and what it implies for the different actors, but also for meaningful interactions and for quality in early childhood education and care. So within my research, I will be presenting an overview of different types of grouping and the implications. I will explore and describe these practices and the meanings of these alternative group compositions for children. And of course, I will also map the voice of professionals and parents on group composition and especially on alternative group composition. Next slide, please. The last month, I visited almost all of the pilot projects that Kati just talked about. And I noticed that the doorgaande lijn, so the concept of the project, for a lot of projects also means a rethinking of group composition. There are a lot of projects that are actually switching from these horizontal age groups to vertical cross-age groups or to growth nests or groups based on children's needs, children's interests. And to address the goals of my study, I have selected 3 cases with an alternative group composition. And 2 of the 3 cases are part of the project Kati talked about. The first case of my study is a rather small project in a more rural area in Flanders. And this project started on September 1st of this year with, they call it a toddler play class. And that's a class that consists of children from childcare and the youngest children from preschool. So the age in this classroom or class group ranges from 0 to 3 years old. And within this group, both a preschool teacher and a childcare professional are present in the group and work with all of the children. It's clear that this project has an educare mindset when it comes to practice, but also when we take the infrastructure of the classroom into account. The classroom looks like a preschool classroom, but also like a room in childcare. And this project strives to go beyond distinction of care and education and address it as one and a concept of educare. A second case that is included in my research is striving for a child center for children aged 0 to 5 or 6 year olds. and their groups will be based on children's need and not necessarily on their age. And by doing so, this project really wants to focus on integration rather than transition and smooth transition. But here in this project, the question arises, what are these needs? How are these needs going to be met in these alternative groups? Are we talking about caring needs or learning needs or both? On what basis are these needs going to be determined and by whom? Because we know that there is an increasing consensus that ECEC should start from a broad holistic view on children's development, where learning and care are not separated. And therefore it seems very interesting and important to look how the concept of care and education and the integration will be addressed in alternative groups or in alternative group compositions. A last case that's included in my research is not a pilot project. This concerns a preschool with class unique, it's called. And these are classes where children are not grouped by age, but the children in the group are 2.5 to 5 years old. So these children are together in a classroom. And within this case, both a teacher, so a preschool teacher, and an after-school care professional work together in the preschool classroom. They do not make a distinction between caring tasks and educational tasks. So every professional tries to do the same tasks. And the idea within this case is that children experience continuity in phases, in places, but also continuity of care and continuity of education. And this from 8 in the morning to 6 in the evening, for instance. Next slide, please. This was my research project in a nutshell. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to put them in the chat or to contact me afterwards. For now, I want to thank you all for your attention, and I will give the floor to Marie.
To your colleague that you didn't leave too much time.
Bonjour à tous, moi je suis Marie Houzen, doctorante à l'Université de Liège et je réalise une thèse sur...
I'm a PhD student and I have carried out a study on different practices in order to study, to try and challenge the split system. In the context of the FBW, as we saw in the first webinar, this context is marked by institutional breakdowns. Next slide.
La dia suivante.
Next slide, please.
Merci. Donc, stop. Donc, le contexte de la Fédération Wallonie-Bruxelles, comme nous l'avons vu, il est marqué
The FW context is marked by institutional breakdowns where few transitional practices are put in place. And in response to these difficulties, various actions are being implemented in order to ensure more educational continuity in our split organization of ECEC services. And this is why in this second webinar, we would like to highlight the emergence of a context where conditions are being put in place that are conducive to innovation and even to the transformation of the established system. Thus, within the framework of the Pact for Excellence in Education, which depends on the Ministry of Education, a working group has started to draft a charter based on the work recently carried out in FWB on transitional practices. The aim of this charter is to define the modalities for the development of transitional practices and also familiarization mechanisms by the actors in the field in a contextualized and therefore not a standardized way. This work, therefore, makes it possible to re-examine the conditions of reception of these young children in kindergartens, which indirectly also involves other actors such as, one, So we have the Office of l'Office de la Naissance et de l'Enfance. One will very soon publish a document aimed at clarifying the notion of educare, which is little known in FWB. These documents published by one can be also put in place by the different community, professional learning communities, for which there are also some initiatives. In this respect, we cite two examples. First of all, the Triangle Project is supported by the Erasmus Plus program. And the aim of this project was generating through transnational mobility, FWB, France, Italy, for example, the joint transformation of professionals that come out of three sectors: reference organizations, so from the governance, our education training establishment, or coming from reception structures. This transformation was oriented towards a better consideration by each of the issues to be met for a quality reception. So the global approach of educare, training issues that occupy a central place. There is a website if you want, and where you can get more information. Another example is the working group of OMEB in Belgium with the Philippe organization, which allows to professionals of three language communities to travel, and so we can may allow for the travel of many professionals, both from the childcare world and from preschool world, so that they can discover different types of sectors, both actors of the preschool and nursery sectors. There are Belgian forums that will be organized in 2023 for the different decision makers of the communities. How can all these measures make it possible to allow the different transformations for the future to go towards the educate approach? This open issue is mainly focused, especially in the next few years. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Belgium. It was very interesting hearing how many projects and how many interesting things are happening in your country. Until now, we heard from researchers, we heard from critical friends, and now it would be great to include policy makers' perspective. And we are supposed to have today with us Elke Verdort, advisor of the Minister of Welfare, Health and Family from Flanders. And I just want to check, Elke, are you with us? Or you had... Yes.
Yes, I am here, but I'm a little bit in the dark, I
happy.
see.
From the attic. But I really want to say a huge thank you for joining us, because you are in the middle of a very important meeting on childcare in Flanders, and you decided to spend some time with us. So we are really grateful. We need more policymakers like that. So let us know your reflections and questions.
Okay, thank you, Zorica, and good afternoon to you all. In the chat, I saw that Ruben was posting that he was a little bit jealous about the Belgium and the chances we give to projects and evaluation. Yes, we give them, but we also have our rules and regulations. In fact, maybe at first, I have to tell you that now in Flanders, we have a huge crisis in childcare, where we see that the system, the rules and regulations we made don't guarantee the in all cases, the physical and psychical health of children. So we have to rethink our system, and we doubt a lot. And Michel can give you the whole story about our crisis. I'm not going to do this, but maybe it's important for you to know this in what I am going to tell you. Now, for our crisis, there's one thing, it gives opportunities. Our government will invest in childcare in the coming year and in the quality of childcare, not in the quantity, which we did in the last years. And my minister started a project for the future of the childcare in Flanders. And in this process, all stakeholders of childcare will, together with the scientists like Michel, challenge the system and make a new plan for the childcare. Starting from the needs of children, like Soricha said, we have to start from the needs of children and the families in which they live. So the project Doorgaande Lijn will give some inspiration for this process of innovation in our early childhood care. The challenge for the project Doorgaande Lijn is that it started from the top. It started from the Ministry of Welfare and not from the bottom, and not from, like in France, from projects which are already there. So it will be a challenge to convince childminders, the childcare centers, but also the schools, Ministry of Education, of the value and the opportunities of Doorgaande Lijn, of challenging this split system. Our split is early at 2.5 years old, but still it will be a work to convince everyone of the need to challenge the system. A question I have about the Doorgaande Lijn, but many projects is they start at birth, at 0 years old. But rethinking our system, recently I read a study of Paul Lieseman from the Netherlands. He made it, I think, together with Pauline Slot for the Dutch government. And between many other interesting findings, they point out that we should be careful with organizing intense use of childcare for babies, for the most 0 to 12 months, the youngest children. And also in Belgium, child psychiatrists like Bine Singh, they also question if babies should be in childcare most of the time. So in Flanders, we surely will have to reduce the number of children per childcare worker. And I read for good childcare for babies, we will need 1 childcare worker for 3 babies. So this will be very little groups. It's very expensive care. So I doubt, and I think, should we think of a system like in Norway, where the parents are more involved in the education or in the bringing up of the babies, and then the child centers or the projecten Doorgaande Lijn. In that case, maybe they should focus more on supporting families with babies in this first year. But it was a question I had for you. We doubt a lot. You hear it in my voice, I guess. we doubt a lot about our system. So this was a question also for Ruben. I had a very practical question. How old are the toddlers in the groups you studied?
They were 2.5 years old.
Okay.
Or elder. So 2.5, 3 years old.
Okay, that's in Belgium. This is already preschool age. Where we start at 2.5 years old. Yeah. Okay.
So maybe that's the question before you run away to go back to the meeting. How do you see opportunities to really transform the system and make this kind of integration on policy level and also on the practice level? Where do you see the sources of, like, I don't know, energy for change? Who are the people? Who are the agents of change?
We asked Michel.
No, I'm not going to ask Michel.
We will. I will ask Michel. The government asks. But I think we already have the system from 2.5 years old in education. So that's
that's in school.
Preschool.
I know a lot about your system.
Okay, we need the projects like Doorgaande Lijn, and I think in Flanders we need to lower the amount of children per childcare minder. I think it's necessary because
and increase their education, hopefully. Increase their education, yes. Lower the number.
Yes, if we can do this, that it would be.
And negotiate with like, how do you call them? Oh God, my brain is okay. Negotiate with the representatives of the workforce. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you so much, and hope to see you again, and hope you update us on the progress.
I will.
And thank you for joining us. So goodbye. And now we are coming closer to the end of our meeting. So I would like to invite Michel Vandenbroeck to tell us few sentences about what happened today, what we heard, what some kind of wrap up of this meeting. Okay. Michel, they're going to ask you for everything and you're going to be responsible for everything.
Okay, thank you, Zorica. Maybe just a very practical reply to Marta Merlo in the chat. We'll look it up, the report that Elke Verdood mentioned. If it's available on the internet, I suppose it is, or it will come soon, and then we can add that to the report. Well, what struck me when listening to the different interventions from Italy, from France, from the Netherlands, from Belgium, is if we want to really challenge the split system and think about what is the need for children from 0 to compulsory school age today, we need to do so on different levels at the same time. We need to do so at least on 4 levels at the same time. First level, or well, in a random order, first level is, of course, the political level, and the political level can mean different levels also, can mean a more general level, but also a local municipal level. So this is important, because otherwise change will also be fragile, always be fragile, and not very sustainable, and too much dependent on individuals. So this political level is one level of change. Another level that is equally important is the training, initial training, but also continuous professional development, because that's where professional identities are made. And when we say training, we also speak, of course, about systemic working conditions, meaning, for instance, child-free hours, like the Italians have mentioned. And that brings me to the level of the professionals, because training is also about curricula. It's also about training institutes that needs to be part of systemic change. And then the third level is, of course, that of the professionals, and it is about continuous professional development. And it is also about exchange, about job shadowing, about international exchange. So maybe our next webinar should be for practitioners, where this international exchange could take place. And the fourth level, and I think it's also important, what many of you have stressed, is the level of research. How important it is that these changes and these innovations are closely monitored, also on the level of what do they mean for real children? What do they mean for children of different ages? What do they mean for parents? What do they mean for families? What do they mean for, indeed, for the practitioners? So these are my observations, is that we need to reflect about how change can inspire all these different levels, and how these different levels together make what we call a competent system, and that it's not just one thing, and that change will always be fragile if it does not address these different levels at the same time. And then maybe a very last information about, after about 1 hour of play, it is still 0-0 in Belgium, Croatia.
Oh God, you're working. I can't believe what. I used to work with football players, just to inform you. No, but I think you made the very interesting points, and I think there is a long road to walk, and we should walk it together, and we should include everybody who is relevant, all the stakeholders in the process, and going back to the competence system, and not allowing that the price of the program is the only important thing. So we came to the end of one more webinar. I asked Vanessa, can I have slides? Thank you all for being part of this webinar, and special thank you to all of you who participated in both webinars. A huge thank you to all disputants and presenters, critical friends, and people who had a lot of questions and comments. Huge thank you to translators. You had a difficult job. People were trying to say so much in such a short time. And a big thank you to my colleagues, ECEC communication team, Teresa and Vanessa. You can't see them, but they're doing magic behind the screen. So we hope we managed to intrigue you, make you reflect and dream about the changes that you want to see in policies and practice, so that all children and families feel welcome and supported in achieving their full potential, and where all professionals on different levels feel respected and celebrated. Visit our webinar webpage. You can see we have a lot of policy reports and infographics about early childhood systems in 7 countries, including Netherlands, France, Belgium, Italy, Finland, Slovenia, and Denmark. And you can also find webinar recordings in English, French, and Italian. And you can also download all the PowerPoints. We also invite you, this is a sign, we also invite you to sign up to ESA's newsletter and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. And if you want to be first to know what's going on and be updated, just sign up. What I can tell you, we are preparing surprise in Intrans project online TOT package. So stay tuned and enjoy your evening, afternoon, and let's hope that next time we will have people from different continents and different parts of the world together. We have a joint mission to make our children realize their full potential and our workforce celebrated and respected. My name is Zorica. Goodbye. And we'll be back for sure.